Hi, I'm John. Welcome to Petrol Age. Today we're talking about head gaskets. Yep, you guessed it. This is a Subaru video. We're doing head gaskets on an EJ25. This is in my Forester. It's a 2001, and I like to call it the Grandma Special. So to get started, the first thing you're going to do is locate your intake box. Your intake box is a big black piece of plastic that's on the back of the engine. It's on the top. You're just going to need a couple of sockets and a screwdriver. This guy comes right out. You're going to detach this from your throttle body. Throttle body right here. It's where all the air goes inside of the engine. That way you can squirt a little fuel in there. Boom, you got power. Find your electrical connections. You'll find the majority of these electrical connections right on the back of the engine, right by the transmission. There's a little clip here that's holding 3 of your connectors. There's a few other connectors throughout the engine. You're going to want to make sure you make a list of these guys. That way you can check them off when you're connecting them and you don't forget anything when you go to start the car. After that, now you got some fuel lines right here on top. I believe what you have is an in, an out, and a vapor line. Next, you're going to want to unhook your radiator. But first, you want to drain it. So go ahead and drain your radiator fluid. There should be a petcock on the bottom of the engine. You just turn that little guy, all the fluid will pour right on out of there. Make sure you don't get any of it around. I heard this stuff tastes like fruit punch, and you don't want your cats getting into it. Once you get your water lines unhooked, then you can get your transmission lines unhooked. These guys are for your transmission cooler on an automatic transmission. These guys are also a couple of band clamps you can find. You don't have to disconnect the actual line connection. You can just disconnect a couple of band clamps down here on the bottom, pop them out, and you're all good. Once you got your air intake, your electrical, your fuel lines, transmission lines, and your water lines all disconnected, now before you pull your engine out, what you're going to want to do is you want to break loose your crank pulley. Because if you don't do this, you're going to end up like me and you'll have to create some crazy contraption to hold the engine still on the stand so that when you're trying to break this nut loose, the engine's not just perpetually rotating. Now, if you rotate this engine, there's no problem with that because this is not an interference engine. It's a horizontally opposed EJ25, so you're going to be totally fine. The bell housing bolts on this car are extremely easy to get to. The one thing you always want to remember about these though is you're seating these into aluminum. So you don't want to put too much stress on any particular bolt, especially when you're mating it back up with the engine. Now you want to make sure you clean everything up while you're inside here. What we did is we cleaned out the whole engine bay, all of the engine compartment, cleaned up the entire engine. Here's a little shot of the valve covers. We're just spraying them down, giving it a good wipe, and they come right clean. They look pretty good when we're done. Now we got all of the extra parts for this car, all of the parts for the valve covers. There's a ton of little seals on the bolts that hold the valve covers on. You have a valve cover gasket, and you also have timing set, water pump, and a few extra seals and gaskets for the inside of the engine. You don't want to forget to put these all on while you're in there. Of course, since all of these cars have a problem with the head gasket, make sure to do a ton of research on which head gasket to get. So we got a multi-layered metal head gasket. These head gaskets do not have the coating that caused the failure problem that the original head gaskets had. So hopefully these ones will last a good 200,000 miles, far beyond the life of the engine. Now, if you're going to take the engine all the way apart, you don't want to forget or just cheap out on not taking your heads to a machinist. Get them decked or planed, whatever verb you want to use to describe it. You want to get your heads machined and cleaned. That way you're not going to have any other problems mating the two surfaces together properly and getting a good seal. After you put your heads on the engine, you're going to want to make sure that you torque down your head bolts according to manufacturer's specifications. There's a few different versions of this exact engine, so I had to figure out what year and exactly which pattern to apply to these bolts, and we're not going to have a problem. You really want to get a good seal on these things because if you have the right gasket and you torque them down properly and you have a clean surface, it's highly likely you will never have to do this again. Well, at least to that engine. Now putting this guy back together is actually really easy. So you're just gonna have to put the engine in the bay, tilt the transmission back so that you can actually mate the engine to the transmission. Once the engine's on the transmission, go ahead and put your bell housing bolts in. Then you can get your transmission lines hooked back up, hook up your water lines, all of your fuel lines. You can get to your electrical connections. Go back on that list that you made, make sure everything's connected properly. Get your battery connected. Then you can put your new oil in there. Make sure you put a new oil filter on and fill it up with antifreeze. Everybody has this moment of truth when you go to start a car that's been down for a few weeks and you're just really not sure what's going to happen. Well, let's just take a look.
Woo! Yeah! Looking good. Looking good.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you click on that bell so you get notified when we upload a video. We're trying to put out more consistent videos now. We got a ton of projects planned. So if you have any suggestions or any questions, please comment down below. Let me know what you think.